Hello everyone. Appreciate the chance to be with you today. I'm Sy Belohlavek, as Amy said. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. And through a series of connections and circumstances, I got connected to the country of Kyrgyzstan. I'm going to get into my pictures here. So if you're like me, growing up in North America, I didn't really know hardly anything about Central Asia, but I had heard of the Silk Road. And on this map, as you can see, the red lines represent some of the routes of the Silk Road. And Central Asia was part of the Soviet Union, obviously, but it had a long history before that. And specifically in the country of Kyrgyzstan, indicated there by the arrow where I now live, resides the Kyrgyz people. And the Kyrgyz people historically are shepherds and nomads. And it's one thing as a settled person coming from a developed country to hear about the nomad life. It's another thing to visit the places where nomadic people tend to live. It's a whole other thing to live there. And I've really come to respect the incredible ingenuity and endurance of nomadic people to be able to not just survive, but even thrive in these challenging environments. And one essential element of that is community. This is the yurt that the Kyrgyz traditionally lived in, and it's really fascinating to watch them put it together and take it apart. And coming in as a visitor, you just look at it like a utilitarian function of a place to live, but in of itself, all the aspects are imbued with meaning and purposefulness and specific function, and is a place to really see the artisticness and a lot of the history of the people. And that communal element is essential for nomadic living, and really neat part of their society. As I mentioned, this part of the world was initially colonized by Russia in the late 18th century, but then quickly transitioned into the Soviet period. And during the Soviet period, Central Asia really was transformed in many different kinds of ways, but specifically industrially. The place had a lot of textile raw materials, and so it was a natural arena for the Soviets to really invest in. And in the mid 20th century, there was large-scale industrialization with cotton production, with silk production, with wool production, and there was literally thousands of people that had jobs working in these facilities. The first city that I lived in Kyrgyzstan is called Osh, and this picture is from a silk factory where 3,000 people worked every day in that place, and was really respected for the quality of what it produced. But as we know, in the 90s, the Soviet Union fell apart, and this picture is also taken in the city of Osh at a cotton facility that had 12,000 people working, if you can imagine. And this man's a friend of mine, and as a young man, he used to go into this facility with the work that he was doing, and remembers how it ran like a beehive, just a lot of activity, people going around everywhere. But as you can see, after the fall, this coordinated centralized system quickly disintegrated, equipment got sold off, facilities closed, and they just sat as empty shells for many years, and increasingly get kind of cannibalized for the raw materials of the steel and cement and so forth to be used elsewhere. And so for a whole generation that had experienced going from nothing to a highly developed industry, then they saw it taken away. It's been very difficult. In the country of Kyrgyzstan, as I understand, 40% of the GDP comes from remittances, where people are going to other countries and working and then sending money back, which is indicative of just not a lot of opportunity locally for people to have jobs and to generate value. And specifically within the textile space, some measure of the raw material production has continued, but that raw material ends up being exported in that most basic, least value form to other places, where the value then intrinsic within it is realized, and the benefit is realized in other places. So specifically with what we've been involved with, working with cashmere, as you may know, cashmere comes from goats, and all goats have hair, but then cashmere producing goats then in the wintertime produce a downy undercoat that insulates them in the winter and then naturally molts out in the spring. And it's that downy undercoat that is considered cashmere. And as I mentioned, in the region of Kyrgyzstan, there was a lot of emphasis and work done with wool and with cotton and with silk. And there was goat fiber at the time, but in this picture, you see what is the original indigenous goat breed, which in post-Soviet times has been recognized as having high quality cashmere fiber, but that was basically overlooked during the Soviet times. And during that time, they actually brought in other goat breeds that had different fiber characteristics, and there was a lot of intentional breeding done to try to increase those goats. Different breeds that the fiber is not necessarily bad, but it would not have the characteristics of true cashmere, which is defined by the fineness of the fiber. And so part of the result of that has been a lot of crossbreeding. So with these goats, you can see their fiber is much less distinct. Like in the first picture, you can see the hair. This is all hair that you see on this goat. And then the cashmere would be inside underneath that. And in the springtime, it starts to come out, and that's when you can comb it off. And there's a distinct difference between the hair and the fiber, whereas this goat, it's almost like they've been morphed together. The fiber that they have is not quite fine enough to be cashmere, but a bit finer than hair, and they call it kashgora. And this fiber, like I said, would not be considered cashmere, would have a lower value on the international market. And so in our case, we had the opportunity to be made aware of the existence of this original goat breed through research done in the mid-2000s, and that catalyzed a vision to try to build a new value chain, isolating that high-quality cashmere and trying to get it to better markets and create a value in that. So I moved to Kyrgyzstan to help pursue this vision in 2010, began making relationships, doing research, traveling out to the villages where the owners of these animals live. And in the spring, summer, and fall, they take the animals up into the mountains, and the shepherds watch them. And so we began to work with them. This is our original team, who we worked throughout the region, going village to village, going to the pastures to be able to work with the shepherds, explain to them the distinction of the value of fiber based on its characteristics on the world market, as well as about combing. Because as I mentioned, in the spring when the fiber molts off, you can comb it out, which is better for the goat because it leaves the hair to continue to protect them when the weather changes quickly. Up in the altitude, you can imagine if you've ever been to Colorado or somewhere with the mountains, it can be warm one day and snowing the next. And so the people had been encouraged by the middlemen that were taking the fiber out to shear the goats to make a fleece, including all the hair with the cashmere in it, which basically left the goat naked in a sense. Whereas we wanted them to comb the fiber specifically so that we could preserve the length, but also then for the goats, it's better for them to maintain protection against the elements. And so we began to circulate around, as I mentioned, educating people with the demand for high quality cashmere, what differentiates it, how to comb it. And then in the springtime, our team would go village to village, coordinating ahead of time to let people know, communicating our price that we would pay for them. And people would comb their goats and bring it to us. And we were able to create a tiered pricing system that would reward quality as well as cleanliness of the fiber, trying to eliminate as much of the hair in the process of combing as possible. And so this enabled people to be able to get up to 40% higher value than what they used to get through the middleman system. Obviously, in a middleman system, the goal is to get the raw material as cheap as possible and then sell it for as high as possible. But because we were in the process of building a more vertical system, we were really wanting to focus on the high quality and therefore give people a better value to be motivated to pay attention and do their part to facilitate that happening. So as we collected the fiber, we then sort through it, prepare it, ship it, and then sent it to Europe. There's, at the time that we started, no industrial processing of cashmere in Kyrgyzstan. And so we would ship it to Europe where it would be scoured and washed and then de-haired, where they separate the hair from the cashmere fiber itself, and then it would be spun into yarn, which we then sent to America to be dyed, and then we began to distribute hand knitting yarn throughout the US, and that went well. We had a chance to expand into Europe as well, some into Eastern Asia, and Amy got involved early on in helping us do that. And around 2016 is when we started the June Cashmere brand, and we chose the word June because that is actually the Kyrgyz word for fiber, and also part of the time of year that we collect the fibers. So we tried to incorporate the Kyrgyz identity into the brand itself and really try to highlight the people and the origin, and as I mentioned, just the intrinsic qualities within their culture with that nomadic heritage that makes it possible for this really unique, dynamic natural resource to be produced and eventually make its way to our customers. So it's been a great experience to get that going and to meet a lot of people and to be a part of a value chain that extends from Asia to Europe to North America. And in 2016-17, things were going well. We were growing and developing. But then I was encouraged by one of our processing partners in Europe to consider opening up a deherring facility in Kyrgyzstan to really position ourselves to grow our scale, as well as let part of the processing happen in country. So after a number of years of research and preparation planning, we had the chance to buy this building and did a total renovation of it. And this is what it looks like now. And we were able to have our machinery arrive in late 2022. Had to, just like everyone, deal with a lot of delays and problems as a result of COVID. But finally, we're able to see our facility begin running in January of 2023. And so we continue to produce and work with the yarn, as I said, that Amy is overseeing. But on a larger scale, we're working with a lot more volume of fiber in the context of Central Asia, and being able to dehair it and then sell that to yarn spinners, primarily in Europe, who then make the yarns and send it upwards through the value chain to made into garments. So this is a picture of what dehaired fiber looks like as it's finished coming out of our facility. And just really amazing material. People call cashmere the king of the fibers, and it's really gratifying to see what it's like at the beginning when it's greasy and dirty and smelly, and then you go through all these processes and just becomes like touching a cloud. And it's always fun to watch people's reaction when they touch it for the first time, and then to see it turn into really noble and regal garments that sell for high value. And working with everyone from the shepherds all the way through the value chain, trying to really see people get a full value, and it's been a really meaningful experience. So that's a little bit about me. So thanks for the chance to share. And Amy, I turn it back over to you.